Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into what I expect is going to be a very exciting beer review indeed. We are jumping into a beer from Urban Artifact based in Cincinnati, Ohio. We've reviewed plenty of their beers over the years, predominantly sour beers, not all of them, but they seem to kind of specialize in really excellent sours, and that is exactly what we're doing again today. You may notice that this is a rather small looking can and your eyes are not deceiving you. This is not a huge glass. This is my same, actually quite small glass that I got from Prairie Artisan Ales sampler pack over the winter. This beer is only in an 8-ounce can. And that is because this, unlike most sours, has an extremely high ABV. Today's beer is called Astronaut Food Blueberry. It is the blueberry variant. And this is a sour ale, and it clocks in at 15% ABV. This could put many an Imperial IPA and Imperial Stout to shame with the ABV. This one's been brewed specifically with freeze-dried blueberries, hence the name Astronaut Food. So freeze drying does a few things. One, it pulls all the moisture out, crystallizes so you can get it out, keep it dry, but it also hyper concentrates the fruit. So aside from this already being hyper concentrated, particularly by weight, not by volume, because it does lighten as soon as you pull the moisture out, it doesn't detract from the sugar content in the actual blueberries itself, hence the extremely high ABV on this beer. And in fact, they use a ratio of 1 pound of freeze-dried blueberries per gallon in their batch that they brew in 1,000-gallon batches. So this is just astronomical. I've never had a beer quite like this. Normally you get fresh fruit or maybe extracts and they press it and all that, and that works out beautifully. But this freeze drying really clearly had the effect of skyrocketing that ABV. So, label art on this, little hard to see, but it looks like a satellite out in space, kind of on the side of the can. Very kind of a purpley grayscale image. Very, very cool in this stubby little can. But without further ado, we're going to get it cracked gently. And this is one I've been saving for when the time felt right to me, and today is that day. This is one of those rare sours that due to this ABV, you could easily age for years. But I want to jump in and see what this one's finally about. I did get it from Tavour months and months ago, mind you. So we're going to jump right in, get this poured into our glass. Oh, very, very purple. It looks lovely. I expect we'll get the whole beer in this glass. No problem. Indeed we did. So first things first, it is a sour. The head's going to dissipate quickly. Let's get right up on it. Wow. It smells massively sour, massively tart. It even smells like there's a nice kind of Brettanomyces funk coming off of the nose. Very strongly smells of blueberries. With the concentration put into this beer, I am not surprised by that at all. It smells exactly as I expected it would smell, and indeed it looks exactly as I would expect. Very, very dark purple blue. Yeah, you can't see light through this one. It's highly concentrated. It's very, very dark, but it looks lovely. It smells absolutely fantastic. We're going to jump right in. Small sip, see what this is about. Oh, man. Wow. That is extremely blueberry forward. Wow. Very, very nice. So there's a lot about this beer that surprises me in the most pleasant ways possible. So I smell a lot of funk on the nose. It smells strongly of Brettanomyces. You get a little bit of that in the flavor profile of the beer. But just like that, in tandem with the sour and the tart, yeah, it's there. But it's not as punch you in the face. Really? This beer, to me, is all about this massive concentration of blueberry. It's extremely blueberry forward. Very, very strong flavor of blueberry, which I think is a fantastic fruit. And I love it in beers. You get them a lot in sours and some lighter ales. But I've never had one that has quite this forward of a blueberry flavor. And I get it's a more expensive ingredient with which to brew. But if you're going to do it, go big. Go big like Urban Artifact did. This is absolutely fantastic. So before we delve further into the nuances of the flavor profile, let's talk about the body and the mouthfeel. It's 15% ABV. It's a small 8-ounce can. I only took a very small sip. But what I got from the body and the mouthfeel is this feels a heck of a lot weightier than your average sour. And frankly, it should. It's got 15% ABV. There's a ton of fermentables in here. It's naturally just going to weighten it up. And this is so far beyond the norm weight-wise for a sour, but it feels completely appropriate for the ABV. Same thing is true of the mouthfeel, though we'll get to more details on that. But in terms of general resistance levels, typically in a sour, you're not going to have a ton of resistance. This one's actually quite resistant. Again, it comes back to this entirely abnormal, in the best way possible, ABV on this beer. It's 15%. It's huge. So yeah, it's way weightier than your average sour, and it's way more resistant than your average sour. Now, what about the other typical kind of sensory experiences you could get from drinking a sour? Is there this nice classic drying effect? There is just a little bit. It actually feels much more akin to an ale in the sense that it feels a lot more full and it feels a lot more round, a lot more wet. There is only the slightest drying, and it happens way, 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 way on the end of the finish. It's nowhere up front. There's no real truncation. It doesn't feel particularly succinct or clipped at all. It feels very wet, very round, and opens up very fully. So it's a very full beer drinking experience. This is effectively, it's got the spirit of an ale in a sour ale. So you don't honestly normally see this all that often, but that's what it feels like. So it's actually quite nice. There's not that much really to go delving deep into in terms of the flavor profile, other than kind of the typical sour beer side and how it relates to the underlying malt bill and additives. But regardless, I am still going to jump back in for a second sip, let everything re-intensify. I'm going to make sure that there's nothing hypercritical I'm missing. Then we're going to talk about the balance of the finish. But on this first sip, delicious and extremely blueberry forward. Absolutely tasty beer. Take two. That body and mouthfeel is impressive. Yeah, so you get this big intense burst of sour and tart up front. It holds pretty intensely for about 2-3 seconds and then it quickly dials back. And it's not quite as intense on the souring as like a kettle sour would be, but it's immediate and it's bold and it holds there and then it just kind of immediately pulls back. During the pullback is when you start to get the opening up of the underlying clearly Brettanomyces, because there is a little bit of quite distinctive Brettanomyces funkiness to it. It's not over the top, but it's enough to like, yep, this is a nice Brettanomyces sour. And just the intensity of the blueberry is just mind-boggling. It is so flavorful and flavor forward with that blueberry. It really is next level for any sour I've ever had that does not have lactose as an addition. This has no lactose in sight. So it's just been purely drawn out entirely by the massive, massive, massive concentration of blueberry that they put into this. And it actually pays massive dividends for the beer drinking experience. So yeah, really nice. I don't want to say that it's kind of minimalist in its flavor profile, because it's not. There's a lot of nuance here and it's a very, very nice flavor ride, but there's not a million different things happening. So it's not kind of palate sensory overload. It's immediate sharpness of the sour and the tart. That backs off. You get that little bit of funk, and then just blueberry that continues to open up and get progressively more intense. That's what this beer is about. It's a story of this sour beer where they packed in just boatloads of freeze-dried blueberry and made this extremely lovely blueberry forward, high ABV sour. This is genius in its simplicity, and I love it for it. I think that the beer is better off for it. They could have added any number of additional things to this beer and pulled, cards out of this corner, cards out of that corner, overthrow everything but the kitchen sink. No, they made this beer with a clear purpose that is absolutely noticeable in the finished product, and it is lovely. And for my money, all the better for it. So the balance. Really, on something like this, we're talking about the balance between the underlying malt bill, the additives, and of course the Brettanomyces. It's perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. Whatever their base malt bill is works perfectly as the base underpinning for a sour ale, and the blueberries are next level incredible, and the souring is nice. It gives you a big sharpness up front. It dials back without lingering too long, and just opens up into this wonderful bouquet of big, bold blueberry right in your face. And yeah, absolutely lovely for that. So balance, perfect. I wouldn't change a thing here either. What about the finish? Well, the finish is longer than your average sour, to be certain, but it's maybe not quite as long as you might anticipate given the ABV. And yeah, it lingers longer than normal, and it really is entirely the intensity of the blueberry that pushes out the length of the finish longer than average, but it's not as long as many other sours that are half of this ABV. And really on this one, what it comes down to is the way that the souring on this beer works. It's very sharp up front, and then within 2-3 seconds, it's dialed back to maybe a 10-15% level of what it hits you with on your first sip. It's actually quite nice because it's quite an experience on each sip. It's an intensity, and then it pulls back. And then these other layers start to open up into the beer. And then kind of the grand finale is the intensity of the blueberry. That's what you're left on the end of the palate before it finally dissipates into just whispers of nothingness. Absolutely fantastic beer. I knew I was going to enjoy this one. When I saw it pop up, I grabbed it. I must say this was not a cheap beer. Considering it's only 8 ounces, it was definitely double digits. I don't remember the exact price. It might have been $20. But for my money, well worth it. I did get mine from Tavour. Absolutely fantastic. I'm glad I set this one aside for a special occasion. Today is that special occasion. Lovely beer. I'm going to take my time to sip on this one, call it my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Urban Artifact's Astronaut Food Blueberry version, a sour ale clocking in at 15% ABV. This one was brewed with freeze-dried blueberries. Urban Artifact based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So guys, this was just a huge sour, absolutely delicious, and easily the most blueberry forward sour I have ever had. The secret of using freeze-dried and the crazy volume they did, it really did work wonders. This was extraordinarily blueberry forward and in the best way possible. So in general, this beer really blew me away. It was one I had been saving for several months. Obviously, this could be aged for quite a long time. Tiny little 8-ounce can and all. But I decided today was the day I actually wanted to see what this was about, and it met my expectations fully. Across the board, did exceptionally well. 2 total categories that did not get a perfect score, so we're going to jump straight to those 2 in question. The first of those is the finish. So, sour ales, you're not typically going to expect a super long finish. This was definitely above average, but considering the very high ABV and the absolute pungency of blueberry, I did actually expect it to last just a little bit longer than it did, but still well above average. I give the finish a 7 out of 10. The second category that did not get a perfect score was the head and retention. Basically, this was just average. It poured exactly as I would expect for a typical sour. Formed a little bit of a head, but you had to quickly get over there to get the info out of the head, and then it was gone. And that's typical for a sour. You're not typically going to see a big, thick, foamy head, and indeed, not only atypical on a sour, I don't particularly care for it. I'm sure that there are some that do, but they're very active in terms of carbonation. This one was just middle of the road, so the head and retention I did give a 5 out of 10, which does leave a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 8 categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, appearance, balance, feeling and intangible, my subjective thoughts category, and finally, example of style. So the total score on Urban Artifact's Astronaut Food Blueberry version is a 92 out of 100. Guys, yeah, it's not every day that you see a sour beer with an ABV higher than most Imperial IPAs and Imperial stouts, but this one did the trick. Absolutely loaded with blueberry, extremely blueberry forward, very, very nice, just packed full of flavor. Had a nice bit of Brettanomyces, both on the nose and in the flavor profile. A really sharp, sour, and tart up front that pretty quickly dialed back and just opened up into just mass blueberry. Absolutely delicious. If you're a big sour beer fan, this is one that absolutely is worth your time. They have several different versions of this beer. I got mine from Tavour. I don't know if they're gonna be planning on grabbing some more cases in the future. And yeah, for the size of the can, it is a little pricey, but it's well worth it if you're into very, very well done, big, once in a while sours that are like no others you would typically drink. This is one to keep on your radar. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop whenever videos go live, just toggle the notifications on by hitting that bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.